Hello, everybody, and welcome to a special review from the Human Echoes podcast. I'm Tony Southcott, and I just got back from The Conjuring 2. Wanted to take a few minutes and tell you guys about it. Just to start, I'm going to try to keep this spoiler-free, but if this is one that you're really excited about, then I would very much recommend going and seeing it first. This is a fun and good movie. It's fairly scary, and that's from somebody who doesn't actually get scared very often from movies. So if this is your kind of thing, if you're a fan of James Wan, definitely go check it out first. Then come back, give us a like and all that stuff on this video. But if you're wanting to know a little bit more about the movie, and if it's something you want to see, let's take a look at it. The movie actually starts at Amityville, which I did not expect. Maybe it was in the previews, maybe it was something else out there. But I did not expect this movie to actually go straight to the Lutz's experience with Amityville in this movie. It was really apparent too. It's like got the slow, moving James Wan style of those moon windows, which, by the way, that house is for sale right now. So if you've got $850,000 and want a place on the river that may or may not be haunted, go ahead and check that out. It's a really cool sequence the way this movie starts out. You're seeing the person before that murdered his family. That is all certified fact that happened there. The Warrens going to investigate it. They're seeing some pretty intense stuff. You're seeing what's going on in the basement, and the way they actually introduce, they're trying to figure out if it's something hateful, if it's something more demonic, like a non-human possessor. And you start seeing the kids, which appear in this photo, which is one of the most notorious, creepy photos on the internet, and they chase them around, and you actually get to see some really cool stuff inside the house, and you get to see a new character that has been added to this whole, James Wan, Lee Winnell, and all these other people that are kind of making a series of movies together. It kind of fits with the Saw universe and all this. I don't know if they're literally canon connected, but you've also got Annabelle and a lot of these other different little possession type things that you could make entire franchises out of. After a point at which Lorraine sees a very, very violent premonition, she ends up basically bailing on the entire situation. She says this is the closest to hell that she ever wants to get, and she's kind of on the fence about even doing the whole exorcism and visions and everything else anymore. So later we end up seeing the Warrens having breakfast, and they're kind of still dealing with this, and they get a call to go to North London to actually check out a house that seems to be having a lot of the same types of possession issues. Something where it's very, very blatantly possessed, or there's blatant possession happening. Lots of interesting kind of poltergeist type things where people are floating, dishes are flying, things are hitting walls, things are breaking, and lots of creepy stuff is going on. This movie does an excellent job, especially in the first half, of giving you a full-on sense of dread and giving you well-earned jump scares. One of my biggest problems with horror movies is whenever they don't earn the scares that they're giving you. And this movie actually takes the time to build anticipation so that whenever you have the jump scare, it actually is kind of a perfect release of tension. It's not just a loud noise out of nowhere. That's my biggest problem with it, is that it's just not a well-earned scare. This movie uses a lot of environment, a lot of just well-crafted sound design, a lot of really cool camera tricks. It's like everything fills in the periphery of the vision of the people that are on the screen, and it does the same thing for you as the viewer. It's always the monsters on the periphery that become the issue. And in the first one, you saw a lot of work with mirrors, and that continues in this. It's kind of the same rules. They stayed pretty consistent with how the ghosts or demons could interact with people. So I felt like this is kind of like the way Insidious and Insidious 2 went, where they're very well linked stories. It might not be quite as much like the singular story arc, like the way Insidious 1 ended, you needed Insidious 2 to really solve what was happening. This one definitely, or The Conjuring 1 had an actual end, this one has an actual end. It's not like a duology or however you would put that. But they do link together really well. The lore is the same, the people are the same, the characters are consistent, and it even has some similar tropes with it. You've got a family that's dealing with a possession, and all these other things that are happening inside the household. The thing that they've done really well with this series is actually making the families seem like a real family. They're not really, really dumb. They're trying to get to other houses. They're trying to do other things. They're trying to lock the doors, and they're basically outside observers, but the haunting is within them, so it travels with them no matter if they're at their neighbor's house. If they were to fly to another part of the world, anything like that, they're still tainted by whatever demons and spirits would haunt them. So it's not so simple as like, oh, just get out of the house and everything will work. Although it does seem like these beings do have a little less power once you do leave the house. So in a lot of situations, when things start to go bad, people bail. And it works. And I like that. Like, I like that this isn't the standard trope of like, oh, we're just going to be super stubborn and we're going to stick it out no matter what because that's the way it works. Well, you can't in these movies. They cover that, and that actually fits in with the whole Insidious type universe. And it feels a little more authentic here. Like, you're not having to come up with excuses for why they can't just leave the house. You have, like, in this family, you've basically got, I think it's 4 girls and a boy. Like, you've got, like, a bunch of likable kids that are just trying to get by after their dad left. You've got the stuttering kid, which I always think ends up being something that's kind of an homage to It, especially because of the way they used him in this, where there is a very, very creepy guy connected to the stutter, where he's got this little training equipment that's supposed to help him out. And it reminds me a lot of It, where it's like he bangs his fist against the posts and still insists he sees the ghost. And they've got little things like that that are added in, and that sort of becomes a part of the movie for a little bit. It's not a major essential part. It's not even a subplot. It's just a really cool little added effect where they can add some impact and some character, and it works really well. I think the only character stuff I don't like in this is a little bit that the Warrens are almost too perfect of a couple. There's no real strife there. They get along really well. They're always a little bit cuddly. They're always like back and forth, like very just on top of their stuff. They know how to talk to each other. And as someone who doesn't see that very much in relationships, for anybody, it's kind of like the whole Mr. Rogers thing where you hear how nice he was to his wife even whenever she's fighting. And it doesn't seem like it happens that often. I guess it does. Most people just get into shouting matches and do their own thing. Whatever. Marriage is hard. But they are like the quintessential perfect linking, and that actually becomes that becomes important later as far as them helping the girls. The main person that's being haunted in this is a 12-year-old girl. Her name is Janet Hodgson. And once again, these are all based off of the supposed true stories of various hauntings that have happened. It's like the Amityville Horror. This supposedly happened in England. It's supposed to be a very well-documented and well-known event that happened. And they had, like, even at the end of the movie, they were playing the actual recordings that they got from the house and trying to show you that, like, yeah, we didn't just, like, make all this up. I'm sure there's a lot of things that they took artistic license with, but they tried to base it a little bit in the reality of what these people experienced. They even had the skeptic come in, though the skeptic was a little bit of a weaker character, but it's kind of what you would expect for somebody that's just staunchly against them. And thankfully, they're not that big of a role. It's a little bit of a subplot that's happening where they're trying to prove that it could be psychosis, because in order to get the church involved, the church has to have some sort of video or authenticated proof that the possession is authentic. They don't want to go in and get involved with any other hoax because they've had some bad press in the past, and they've been a little bit too quick to act whenever it was just some people trying to get attention. So they task the Warrens with getting this proof so that they can come in and do the exorcism or anything else that they need to do. I guess whenever you get down to it, this is a movie that is about family. It's about like just unresolved issues. The voice you hear in the trailer is definitely a very, very creepy man. The way they set it up, like he's definitely a very strong antagonist, and there's a lot of really cool stuff that goes on with him. This movie also has a nun character, which you see at the very beginning of the movie. I'm pretty sure you've seen her in the trailer too, and she is terrifying. Like, I'm usually not that bothered by this sort of stuff, but there's some stuff that happens with paintings. There's a lot of really intense stuff with this nun character, and she kind of steals the show. I have a feeling that in a few years you're going to be seeing people talk about this particular character. I can't even really give the name without giving some stuff away. and it'll be something that it'll be a memorable horror icon for a little bit. So I don't want to get too much into like the actual spoilers of this movie. I want you guys to go and see it. I want you guys to enjoy it. I want you to understand that James Wan is really good at what he does. He's really good at making a film that's very pretty, that's dark when it needs to be dark, that's not afraid to scare you with the lights on, and really pushes a pretty decent pace. Like, with The Conjuring and The Conjuring 2, both of them move pretty briskly along. They're constantly giving you effects, most of which are actually in camera, so there's not a whole lot of cheesiness or a whole lot of weird CGI stuff happening. There are moments like in The Conjuring 1 whenever you've got crows flying around the house and it doesn't quite ring true. But with both of these movies, almost all of the stuff dealing with possession is practical effects or a little bit touched up with CGI, so it ends up looking really authentic. They got one of my favorite actors for doing monster effects. Javier Botet is in this movie. And so if you guys have seen Mama or various other films where he's gotten to do his thing, that dude is authentically creepy and awesome. So expect to see some really cool stuff with this. Overall, I would honestly recommend this movie if you like horror. Try to find a fully packed theater to go see this in, because if you're like me, it's always enhanced by seeing the unsolicited reactions of other people. I was watching as people were shouting out stuff in the background of, no, don't go, don't go, don't go. And maybe that would annoy some people, but whenever you can feel the tension in a room building up and building up, building up, and then they finally hit you with something and somebody shrieks and you can just feel it release, and it's just like everybody's giggling a little bit because it actually scared them, not because the effects were terrible, like I've seen with some horror movies I've gone to. It's a really fun experience. That unsolicited reaction is one of my favorite things that I ever get to see in horror movies. So I had a lot of fun with this one. It was a great time for me to see. I would give the movie about a solid 8 out of 10. Like, there are a few things that I could get into, but once again, it gets a little spoilery that might have knocked off 1 point. But this is a solid horror movie. The Conjuring is a great series that I think they could probably pull some other ones, especially if you start getting into the other hauntings in the room, like we talked about with Annabelle earlier, which is kind of a prequel to all this. There's a lot of cool little tchotchkes and little things that could be demon possessed that could go off onto their own series, and I'm sure there's going to be some because there's going to be a little bit of cash milking here. This one is from New Line Cinema. For some reason I expected it to be Blumhouse, but that's because almost everything I've watched recently that's horror or suspense or a little bit weird has been A24 or Blumhouse or both. But this was a solid entry into the horror genre. Another good one from James Wan, who just keeps getting better as a filmmaker. Maybe not better as a storyteller. He's definitely better than the Saw days, or at least in my opinion. I enjoyed the Saw movies, but there was still a lot of torture porn in there. Like The Conjuring and The Conjuring 2 show that you don't have to dig too far into the real sinew and muscle of people to actually bring good scares and to tell a good story. So I'm really glad that he's matured as a filmmaker. His style is impeccable. It's definitely his. It's almost iconic in a lot of ways. Just the use of color. He has never, I think there's one still frame shot in the entire film, where he lets the camera sit there, but otherwise, even the small panning shots, it's on a dolly, it's on a dolly, it's on a dolly. There's always movement happening, and that's a lot of the ways that he's able to make things stick to your peripheral vision and to make you anticipate that there might be something or behind that door. It might be behind you. It might be hiding above you. There's a lot of movement that's always happening, and I've always enjoyed that about his work. So once again, go see it. It's a good movie. I would give it the 8 out of 10. And yeah, that is my review of The Conjuring 2. Please let me know what you guys thought in the comments, or subscribe. Check out humanechoes.com for a lot of other cool content. We've got our review of a North Korean movie coming out today called Hong Kil Dong. And that's a very fascinating review and a very fascinating movie. So we've got a lot to talk about that. It's a North Korean kung fu movie, and I think a lot of you are going to be very surprised about things that happen with that. So check out our other content. Thank you very much for sticking around, and have a wonderful night.